Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Rajat Sanyal from the Department of Archaeology, University of Calcutta. Today we'll discuss a module on patterns of dating inscriptions. As we all know, the dating of inscriptions are very important on two grounds. Firstly, the dates presented in the inscriptions provide invaluable sources for different aspects of reconstruction of history, starting from the political history to the religious history. And most importantly, these dates provide cues to understanding the patterns of evolution of script within a particular span of time in a specific or given geographical region. So primarily, the dating of inscriptions or the dates in the inscriptions are very important in understanding these aspects of early Indian culture. Now, if we turn to the learning objectives of the present module, we have divided into three segments as we will illustrate. The first segment deals with the patterns of dating inscriptions. This is somewhat in common to what you have learned in the module on era in inscriptions, because for considering the dates of inscriptions, we will have to look at the different dating patterns as internal evidence of the inscriptions. Therefore, the first segment is pattern of dating inscriptions. Within this are the dates by regnal reckoning and the dates by era reckoning, and a very interesting aspect, though very neglected aspect of early Indian epigraphy, the dates expressed by numbers. We'll have a separate section on this. And finally, the third segment will be on the methodology of dating inscriptions, how as epigraphists or archaeologists we date the different inscriptions. Now we may begin with the initial segment. Pattern of dating inscriptions, as I just said, have two different connotations. Number one is the internal aspect, how dates are recorded in the inscriptions. And the second connotation is methodological, which means how we may reconstruct the date of an inscription, where the dates are given in different manners in different epigraphic records. Now the point is how these dates occur in inscriptions. There are of course exceptions to this, but in general there are four different patterns in which dates surface in epigraphic records of early South Asia. The first one is dating by year. The second one is dating by a specific date. The third one is dating by a specific era. You may remember we have learnt about the specific era in a different module and the implications of dates within specific era in that particular one. And finally, the dates with words that will form our second segment. Now coming to the details of all these four, dating by year is the earliest method of dating inscriptions. It's the earliest pattern that we see in the inscriptions of India. As you all know, as documentary evidence, the earliest inscriptions are those of Ashoka. And if we take a look at the different types of Ashokan inscriptions, starting from his major pillar edicts to minor pillar edicts, to major rock edicts, and minor rock edicts, and separate edicts, everywhere in most of the inscriptions, his regnal years are mentioned as dates. Now, if we proceed further to the close of the pre-Christian era, we have the famous example of probably the earliest proper Prashasti of the time of the Kalinga king Kharavela, found from Odisha. If we take a look at the narrative represented in the text of this inscription, we see that the activities of the king are being described inexceptionally in terms of his regnal years. Thus, starting from his first to the 13th regnal years, the activities are narrated. This implies that the dates are again expressed in terms of regnal years. Turning now to the north of the country, if we look at the inscriptions of the Kushanas, the large number of donations made in different parts of the Kushana dominion, we find that all these inscriptions are mostly dated, unlike the regnal years, the year of a particular era. But the contemporary inscriptions of Deccan are again dated in the regnal year of a king. For example, if we take a look at the Nagarjunikonda inscription of Euvala Shanktamula, we find here again this inscription of 3rd century CE is dated in terms of the regnal year of the king. This practice of dating by regnal years was not an early historic phenomenon. It continued throughout the early medieval period. For example, if we take a look at the early Eastern Indian inscriptions, early medieval Eastern Indian inscriptions, starting from the time of the Pala rule, we find that not only their copper plates, but also the large number of donative records of Bihar Bengal region, recording names of certain Pala or Sena kings, are dated in terms of the regnal year of the king. Very seldom we have reference to the regnal year of the king as well as a specific date in terms of a particular sambat, like the Vikrama Sambat or the Shaka Sambat. Therefore, the latest occurrence of this type of recording in terms of the year of the ruling king continues till the early medieval period. Richard Salomon suggests that the classical method of dating the epigraphs was the recording of the era, the month, the fortnight of the lunar month. Mostly these inscriptions are donated or drafted in the lunar fortnight of the month or the lunar paksha of the month. That's why the specific lunar fortnight is also mentioned, and then the lunar day or the tithi. This is the standard normalized set of information that you find in the inscriptions of early historic India when specific dates are recorded. But here again we have to remember this year segment of this whole set. As you can see, year, month, fortnight and the day of these, the year segment can be recorded either in terms of a known era or again in terms of the old practice of regnal reckoning. Now if we come to the specific dates, the earliest example of the recording of a specific day of the week is this inscription by Buddhagupta, found from Iran in Madhya Pradesh. Its date is year 165 of the Gupta era. This is the departure from the regnal reckoning. Here we do not have the regnal reckoning or the regnal date, but the date in terms of a particular era. In this case, the Gupta era, which will be later termed the Gupta Vallavi era. This inscription records a date of 484 CE. The specific day of the week is recorded as Suragurur Divase, that is on the Guruvar, that is the Thursday. This is the earliest occurrence of the record of a day in recording the date of an inscription, according to Solomon's study. Now, the third type, dating by an unspecified era. This example is from an inscription which is now preserved in the Jamui Museum in Bihar. This is a two-lined inscription which reads in the Gaudi script of 12th century, Deodharmoyang Danapati Shaubaku Suta Vedakasya, followed by, then there is a ched or stop, and then Samata, 2 digits, 1 and 8. So this is the donation of a person named Vedaka, who was the son of Shaubaku, and this is dated in a Samata, which is actually Sambata, 1-8. But it neither records the name of a king, nor it specifies the era in which this date is recorded. It only records Samvat, which means year. This can be the year of a ruling king, or can be the year of a particular era as well. We have no clue to the actual year in which this was donated. This is an inscription on an image. Now, this is the task of the epigraphist to reconstruct, to recover from which era or from which reckoning this might have been taken. Since this is found in the Bihar area and is dated in the 12th century, where at that point of time, the Lakshmana Sena Samvat was a current reckoning. Probably this year 1-8 represents the 18th year of the Lakshmana Sena Samvat. And here is the importance of having a detailed knowledge of the different reckonings, because unless we know the regional perspective of looking into the dates, we cannot understand that this particular specimen coming from this region might have its connection with that era, as in this case, the Lakshmana Sena era. But these are always probabilities, and many a times such reconstructions or such recovery of dates are debated. Now we may come to the second segment of the discourse. This is dating by words. Unlike all other reckonings, dating by words is a method which is not usually studied. It's a much neglected part of Indian epigraphy, although we have a huge gamut of inscriptional source, that throw light on this particular practice of early Indian poets and early Indian inscriptional composers. As a terminology, the dating with words is called chronogram. Now, what is a chronogram? The Oxford Dictionary has no definition of a chronogram. Instead, it provides the definition of the term chronograph, which is a device for recording time extremely accurately. This is a different issue. But if we turn to the Webster's dictionary, we see that the Webster's encyclopedic edition, it has a definition that says an inscription in which certain letters, usually conspicuously different from the others, express a date or epoch on being added together by their values as Roman numerals. So, chronogram means a series of words that actually, when subjoined, will give a particular date. This is a very interesting aspect of Indian epigraphical practices, but yet very much neglected aspect of study. DC Sarkar made an extensive study of the chronograms appearing in the inscriptions of early India. According to him, the reason behind the genesis of chronogram were manifold. First of all, the poets used to write dates. When they started writing dates with words, they used to write the same word for a particular date. For example, if one writes Veda, this stands for 4 because the Vedas are 4. But if this particular word Veda is always written standing for 4, this becomes a bad style. This is considered a bad style of writing because you don't have variation in your poetic skill. So they needed different words for the same digit. That's why these authors required, as you can see in this slide, large number of words for indicating a particular or same number. In this way, when they started using different types of words for the same digit, a convention gradually developed according to which ordinary words that can be in one way or the other associated with the particular number came to be used to imply those numbers. All the Sanskrit words, this is D.C. Sarkar's example, that all the Sanskrit words meaning the hand came to be used to indicate 2, since man has only 2 hands. So it primarily developed in order to meet the necessity of satisfying a chanda or meter. Probably this is the reason initially. Initially this was a necessity. The poets wanted to have more words for the same digit because different words have different number of aksharas in them and they will fit into different types of meters or chandas as and when required in different compositions. This was the basic necessity from which this thing developed, this chronogram practice developed. But later it became a fashion to record dates in terms of chronograms. And we have large number of evidences throughout India in the form of mostly number 1 temple inscriptions, number 2 manuscripts where these chronograms are recorded. Now I will show you some examples. Here is an inscription where you can see the red marked area, which reads Bhudhara Chandra Vaji Shashi Yute in the 4th and the 5th line. Now Bhudhara is 8, Chandra is 1, Vaji is 7 and Shashin is moon 1. So the date of the inscription is 8, 1, 7, 1. But how do we read this date? We have to read this date in the reverse order because, as early mathematicians have suggested, that digits should be counted from right to left. Ankanang vamato gati. We'll have to proceed in the reverse direction, from the point of the ones to the point of the hundreds or thousands. So we have to reverse the digit. So the date becomes 1718. This is a specific era date where the shakara has been used, and you have to add 78 to have the proper date. Here again, you have a complex representation. Ritvashva rasa bhumi bhi mite. So it starts with Ritu, seasons, which are 4, Ashwa, horse, which are 7, Rasa, the tests, the 6 eternal tests, and Bhumi, the earth, which is 1. So the date is 6761. Now if we just turn it around, it comes to 1676 in a particular era, which is Shaka era, as I said. Here again, you have a different kind of a chronogram. It reads Trivindu Shunyendu, which means Trivindu Shunya Indu. So, Trivindu are 3 dots and then the Indu is 1. So, you have 30 followed by 1. You just reverse this, put it in the reverse order, it becomes 1000. We also have example of a single word representing 4 digits. How is this? One inscription records Faniraja Shirsha Ganite. Faniraja Shirsha means the great serpent Vasuki who had 1000 woods. So Faniraja Shirsha means 1000 or 1000, as here in Trivindu Indu. So chronograms are represented in different manners, in different inscriptions, according to the necessity of the chanda and the availability of the space. Here again, you have another example of the chronogram. It writes Veda Vedanka. Veda is 4, then again Veda is 4, and then it's Anka, which is 9. So the digits are 449. So the date would be 944. But here is the problem of the era. This is a new dimension of the dating by chronogram. Usually, dates are represented in, when we reconstruct dates, we find 4 digits, starting from the ones to the thousands. But this is the year 944. What was this era? This was a current era of medieval Bengal, where the Molla rulers, they ruled in the western part of the Bengal Delta, and they started an era of their own. So this inscription is dated in that Molla era, which is 944, that comes to the late 17th century. Here is an inscription from another part of Eastern India, where you have another interesting occurrence of a chronogram. It reads Vidhu, Kara, Deepa, Shashi. The 4 letters. Vidhu is Chandra, that is moon, 1. Kara, a 2 hands. Deepa, it's a wrong spelling. It's actually Dvipa. What the author intended is Dvipa. He wrote it Deepa. It was an author's mistake. So Dvipa are the 7 islands. Sapta Dvipa Vasumati. We are aware of the tradition. So there are 7 Dvipas, and then finally Shashi again is the sun. So the date is 1271, and it comes to 1721. This is probably in the Shaka era again. Now we may turn to the methodology of dating inscriptions. This is the third and the final segment of our module. So, if we summarize the works of our earlier pioneering scholars, there are 4 different aspects of dating inscription, methodology of dating inscriptions. One is the conversion and verification of specific dates, the conversion and verification of dates under a specific era, the same conversion and verification of the dates under unspecified era, and then calculation of the technicalities of a date or a particular tithi. These 4 are the major methodological aspects of dating inscriptions. Richard Solomon has illustrated this problem, the last problem of the 4, with a case originally studied by Keelhorn. As Solomon writes, by way of example of these and the other complications involved in the verification of inscriptional dates, we may cite the Chandpur Bor inscription, which is dated Samvat 1207 Jeshtha Vadi, which means in the Jeshtha month on the 11th Ravu, on the 11th day, that is the Sunday, the 11th day of the dark fortnight of Jeshtha, Vikrama 1207. On the basis of the Surya Siddhanta, Franz Kielhorn, the famous German Indologist, he calculated the following possible equivalents of this date. If you see, there are 6 different probabilities about the particular date of this inscription. And if you take a closer look, there are 3 or 4 northern dates and 2 southern dates. Why was it? If we look at the reckoning of the Vikram era, this era was reckoned in different manners in southern and northern India. In northern India, it had a particular date of the end of the month, and for southern India, the months ended in a different manner. That's why one is Amanta and the other one is Purnimanta. So you have, based on the ending of the month in the full moon or the new moon, you have different dates for a particular inscription, and these probabilities have to be all considered for reconstructing a date in terms of looking into the technicalities of the tithi or the specific date on which this inscription was issued. Dating of inscribed sculptures and related problems, it's the final issue of this module, and this is a new issue that we have to consider. The generally inscribed sculptures are dated in the light of the paleography of the inscriptions. Whenever we find an inscription in a sculpture, we have a tendency of dating the sculpture in terms of the paleography of the inscription. Such inscriptions and the dates sometimes offer major dates for the development of art historical schools. Many a times, comparative chronologies of different art historical schools of different regions and different periods, these are also reconstructed on the basis of the inscriptions present on the sculptures. But this is problematic, and this exercise of dating sculptures with only inscriptions might be a risky exercise, as you will see in the following slide. This is the famous Bodh Gaya Keshava Prashasti of the time of the Pala king Dharmapala. This was dated to the late 8th or early 9th century because it is dated in year 26 of Dharmapala. This was found from Bodh Gaya. But a recent study by Gautam Sengupta has clearly shown that this is a sculpture. The stylistics and the iconographic program of the sculptures shows that this was a creation of an artist of 7th century. This inscription that is there at the right of the panel is written about a century later than the original sculptures were produced. So if we date the inscription, rather the sculpture, in terms of the paleography of the inscription, we will be doing injustice with the issue of stylistics and aesthetics of the sculpture. So we have to also remember that all the dates are very important for dating inscriptions and other inscribed objects, inscriptions in general or other inscribed objects, but we have to be cautious in how we use these dates for dating artifacts, archaeological artifacts. Now we may summarize the whole discussion. Inscriptions were dated in early India, as we have seen, in varying systems, we have regnal dates, we have specific dates, we have unspecified era, and words used for dating inscriptions. Sometimes a date is represented in terms of both a year and a date under a specific era. There is also the reverse case. An inscription is dated neither in terms of a particular era nor in terms of the particular year of a king. It might only record the date of the year, as we saw in the case of the Jamui inscription. And then chronograms or expressions of dates with words. This became a wide practice, as we have just seen with several examples. We have hundreds and thousands of examples of this throughout South Asia. And the four major issues that we have to remember, we must remember, while considering the question of dating or the patterns of dating inscriptions are these methodological aspects. These are the conversion and verification of the three different types of dates: specific era, unspecified date, and finally the technicalities of the date, the astronomical issues involved in the date. These we have to consider while studying patterns of dating in early Indian inscriptions. For more information on the issue, visit the URL of the EPG Pathshala, and you can also go to the other quadrants of the module where the texts and more information on this module are available. Thank you.